BBC Sounds
and your smart speaker.
Play BBC Radio Scotland.
24 minutes to 8, you're listening to Radio Scotland Breakfast this morning with Martin, Laura and Phil. We're here until 9 o'clock. We've had lots of texts already about heating oil and other matters. Keep them coming. But first of all, we're going to talk about the dual role of the Lord Advocate in Scotland, because the Scottish Conservative MP John Cooper will present a bill at Westminster today. This is aimed at ending what he calls the damaging conflict of interest caused by the Lord Advocate's dual role as both the head of the prosecution service and legal advisor to Scottish ministers. Now, yesterday, the Scottish Government ruled out any changes. This was following an independent review, which was commissioned before the row around the sharing of information to the First Minister relating to the former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell. Let's talk to Thomas Leonard Ross KC, Defence Counsel from Benchmark Advocates in Glasgow, and also a former president of the Scottish Criminal Bar Association. Good morning to you.
Morning, Laura.
So, Thomas, you were here just a couple of weeks ago. You were defending Dorothy Bain KC after that controversy about the sharing of information with the First Minister. But let's talk and remind us why, separate to that and to any personalities, this role, this dual role of the Lord Advocate acting as both the head of the prosecution service and having a ministerial role as the chief advisor to the Scottish Government, why has that come under question?
Well, I mean, it creates a difficulty when senior government officials are involved with the prosecution system, because obviously the Lord Advocate, whoever it is, has a dual role as head of the prosecution system, but also principal legal advisor to the government. So the closer the suspect or the accused is to the government, the more difficult it makes it, because obviously there's a public perception that the suspect or accused might obtain some advantage from being close to a government minister. That's essentially it in a nutshell.
Do you think that is the case, that public perception could be an issue, or do things run deeper than that?
Well, I mean, it's a massive issue. The storm a couple of weeks ago made it clear that there's huge public concern about it. I mean, it's probably not likely to arise that often, but it can arise. I mean, there are a couple of corporate manslaughter inquiries ongoing at the moment regarding a couple of medical issues. And, unless this problem's dealt with, it'll arise again in the event that, for example, a decision is taken not to proceed, against the government or against an agency of government. Then again, it'll be suggested by some who aren't necessarily neutral observers. Some of them will be doing it for political advantage, but in a way it doesn't matter. If it's been put out there in the ether that, that they've obtained an advantage from the dual role of the Lord Advocate, then it makes it uncomfortable for the Lord Advocate, which isn't fair, because it wasn't the Lord Advocate or the lawyers who created this situation.
And the Lord Advocate won't be involved in the prosecution of a case that is political, that's linked to politics. But the Scottish Government said yesterday that the current setup is appropriate. This was after this report, and the man that wrote that report for the Scottish Government, the former Scottish Law Commission Chief Exec Malcolm McMillan, he said the current and previous Lord Advocates had told him there's no right or perfect solution to resolving these tensions. Yeah. Where does that leave things? And do you agree? Is that right, that there is no perfect solution here?
I agree with them that there's no perfect solution. There's certainly 100 solutions better than the one we've got at the moment. And of course, it's right that he should have spoken to former Lord Advocates, but it's a bit like asking the Emperor what he thinks of his new clothes. It doesn't really matter what they think. It's a question of what the public think. And if the public think that the government obtains some advantage from the fact that the Lord Advocate has the dual role, then, it's time to do something about it. And I would also add, constitutionally, it doesn't really matter what the SNP think either, because the legislation which will be brought in to cure this will be made at Westminster, and I think the SNP only have 9 MPs at Westminster. So if the decision is taken at Westminster to sort it, it will be sorted independent of what the SNP think.
Yeah, and that attempt happens today, doesn't it? This will be brought by the Scottish Conservative MP John Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, Joanna Cherry previously brought a private member's bill to try and sort it, and, she got no support from anybody really, and it's sort of withered on the vine. So I'm glad that it's been up for debate again.
You said you agreed that it wasn't a perfect situation. What are the solutions? What alternatives could be put forward?
Well, I mean, in England, the Attorney General is the principal advisor, and the Director of Public Prosecutions is the head of the prosecution system. And the report says that there's still, to some extent, a conflict because the Attorney General is technically responsible for the department, the DPP. But, I mean, it's clearly a much different situation from the public prosecutor sitting at cabinet meetings. You know, I mean, the Lord, in this situation, the Lord Advocate was essentially appointed on the recommendation of Nicola Sturgeon, and then within a few years, Nicola Sturgeon is arrested by the police. Now, ultimately, there was no evidence to justify charging with anything. But the minute that situation happens, the Lord Advocate's then in a pretty impossible position, because even if there is no evidence justifying any charges, the suspicion will be that, the suspect has obtained some advantage from the fact that she essentially appointed the Lord Advocate. You know, that there just has to be a better solution to the issue than this.
Do you think change will come, given that it was ruled out yesterday by the Scottish Government?
I mean, it doesn't matter what the Scottish Government think, because it's a legacy of the Scotland Act 1998, which is Westminster legislation. So Westminster legislation could be changed tomorrow. And as I say, the Scottish Government really don't have any influence on that. The SNP have some influence, but I think they only have 9 MPs at Westminster, so they certainly couldn't block any attempt to amend the Scotland Act to sort the situation out.
And if there wasn't to be any change, do you think that we would see future cases?
I mean, to be honest, when I was at university, the idea that so many people close to government in Scotland would be caught up in the criminal justice system would have seemed impossible to me. But, you know, it's been, with the SNP, it's been a bit a recurrent theme, I'm afraid. And, you know, Mr. Murrell isn't the first figure close to the SNP who's been involved with the prosecution system. So it may be another 50 years before we have similar experiences, you know, but it can happen. And as I say, there are these corporate homicide inquiries which clearly concern the government. And, if decisions are taken not to prosecute, the concern is that, you know, the public will raise these concerns again.
Thomas Leonard Ross KC, thank you very much indeed. We did ask to speak to the Cabinet Secretary for Justice, Angela Constance, this morning, but she declined our invitation.
Why have neither Rangers or Celtic made any public comment